Yo, what is going on, everybody? This is Beanie and welcome back to another player review. This is the player review that I have been waiting for, guys. I've been waiting on this 99 Carlos Beltran all freaking year. I'm so excited that it's here. And they released a lot of other cards too. So many that I really don't think that I could reasonably review all of them in like a reasonable time frame. So I ended up kind of going through them and picking the 10 that I thought were the only ones that were really notable of review. The other guys were like guys who already had cards that had better overalls. Like they released a couple Jack Morrises. He already has a better card. They released Bert Blyleven, who we've reviewed 1,000 times, and every single time it's the same thing. Raleigh Fingers was another one, and he already has a better card. So I really wasn't worrying about reviewing those guys, but there were 10 guys who are really, really intriguing. So with that being said, let's get into the review. Okay, we have to start out with the 99 Beltran. The 99 Beltran is unbelievable, guys. He's a 5-tool stud. I guess more of a 4-tool stud. His arm isn't, like, amazing, but it is serviceable. So I think the fact that all of his tools are above average kind of makes him really the best 5-tool in the game, considering that he's also a switch hitter. I know that the Andre Dawson has better raw numbers, and you know what? I think I still may give the tip of the cap to Andre Dawson, because this Carlos Beltran does have a couple of flaws that I want to talk about. One is that he has an auto shift on him, and really that's the only flaw. That's the only big flaw about this card, other than the fact that he doesn't play amazing defense like that Andre Dawson does. This is the only part that I would say is just a true flaw with this card, is that he does have that auto shift on him when he bats left-handed. But there are ways to get around that. A lot of people, because he has good speed and he's a good hitter and all that, a lot of people may be tempted to bat this guy leadoff. I'm here to tell you right now, I would not bat him leadoff. I would bat him third or fourth, because if you can manage to get your first 2 or 3 hitters on base, then the auto shift goes away. And the auto shift is really, really difficult to hit against. So I think it would be better to have this Beltran come up more often with guys on base than to try to hit him leadoff as a table setter, because he's not going to be very good at getting on base if he has to hit against that auto shift. So yeah, that is how I would kind of handle this Carlos Beltran. But let's just talk about the card in general. In general, this card is amazing, guys. He has excellent contact, excellent vision, not elite contact or vision, but very, very, very good, like upper echelon contact and vision. He does have elite power, like almost as good as power can get. If you can get a hold of the ball, this guy can hit it out. Defensively, he's very serviceable. I wouldn't play this guy in center field. If you can find a spot for him in left field, or hell, I don't even know, maybe first base, that would be really good for this card, because defensively he's not great, but he is a guy who could get the job done in a corner spot, preferably left field, because his arm strength probably isn't good enough to play in right field and be an asset out there. He would just kind of be there. But he also has great speed, so he can cover a lot of ground with the 82 fielding, the 79 reaction. With the 83 speed, he's going to be able to cover a good bit of ground. And preferably, you would have a really good center fielder and right fielder out there to make your entire defense kind of gel together and be an effective outfield. And as far as the speed goes, he has great speed. 83 speed is very good, but he also has that 97 stealing. And when it comes to stealing bases, I think that stealing and speed are equally important. So that 97 stealing is really, really good. It's not going to help you, you know, like stretch singles into doubles and doubles into triples. But it is going to help you, you know, whenever the play is dead and you need to try to steal a base or something. So that's really good. Taking in the whole package, the fact that this guy's a switch hitter, the fact that you can get around that auto shift, the fact that he just has so much power, the fact that he's serviceable defensively, the fact that he's a good base runner, this guy is just excellent. He's not the best card that I reviewed. That is a difference from last year. Last year, I didn't think it was a question. The 99 Beltran was the best card in the game. I never questioned that at all last year. This year, I do think that there are a few cards that have an argument that they're better than this card. And whenever I graded him, because his defense wasn't that great and there were other guys that had better defense, I ended up giving him a grade of a 9, or a FAG of a 9.4. Okay, next up is another ticket counter item, which is the 92 overall John Lester. Well, before I start that, a lot of people have been asking me the question, is the 99 Beltran worth it at 15,000 tickets? No doubt about it, he's worth it. If you have the tickets, buy him. There probably aren't going to be that many cards in the game that are the complete package like this card. He's fantastic. But moving on to the 92 Lester, this is another guy who's very, very interesting, a guy who I bought and who I plan on trying out as a starting pitcher. I really like him, guys. He has decent per nines, a 157 combined hit and K. That's above that 155 mark, so he's not great in that aspect, but you know, he comes in above that threshold of what I believe to be an effective starting pitcher as far as his per nines go. His pitch selection is fantastic. Four-seam cutter, sinker, sweeping curve, and a changeup. I kind of wish that that cutter was a slider, or that maybe his fastball was a slider, or his four-seam was a slider, or something like that. But I mean, I can't get too picky when it comes to that because he does. I mean, you rarely get starting pitchers, especially lefty starting pitchers, that have pitch selection this good. And his stuff is okay, too. He's got good velo for a lefty. He's got great break for a lefty. Overall, I really like this card, and I ended up giving him a fag of an 8.5. Moving on to the 93 overall Kelvin Herrera, the last notable ticket counter item. I know that there was that 89 J.J. Hardy as well, but I think that this 93 Herrera is the last one that I would consider buying for my team, and he's a doozy, man. He is really good. But he's kind of weird. Kelvin Herrera has never been a guy that has had like 99 per nines, which is a lot of the time what I look for in my relievers. I want that PCI to be as small as possible. He's always had really good per nines, but never, you know, the elite of the elite. Per nines, you know, like the Batances and the Kimbrels and the Chapmans, even though Kimbrel sucks. But yeah, he's never had, his per nines have never been that good, but he's made up for it with pitch selection and velocity, and per nines that are still very good, just not elite. And his stuff is among the best in the game. He has very good speed differential. He throws 100 to 101. He has great break on all of his secondary pitches. I mean, he really is the total package. The only way he could be better is if, like, his two-seam was a sinker or something like that. But as is, it's just a phenomenal card, and I graded it out at a 9.2. Okay, now let's talk about the pack rewards. The first pack reward that we're going to talk about, or the pack pull, I guess, that we're going to talk about, is the 93 overall Salvador Perez. As you can see, I have him, but it's not because I went out and bought him. I pulled him in a pack. And this card is really just, to me, it's like the least inspiring card that I'm going to be reviewing today. I just wasn't that pumped about it. There are so many... well, there aren't really... I mean, catcher is actually kind of shallow, but I tend to forget that because they came out with that free Mauer. Basically, it's a free Mauer. And that if you just, you know, spend the time to grind conquest that you can get. And he's just so good that any other catcher, unless it's just amazing, I'm going to kind of forget about. But this 93 Perez isn't terrible. It's just not that inspiring. Against righties, he's okay, well, I mean, he's well above average for a catcher. 72-83, that's very good. Against lefties, he's about average for a catcher. 59-69, it's not great, but there aren't a lot of catchers that hit both sides really well. His vision is obviously really good, so his PCI size isn't going to be a problem, at least against righties. Against lefties, it may, with that 59 contact, it may be kind of an issue. But this guy's calling card has always been his defense, and, you know, I've tested this out with Cardinal Bird, and I really don't think the catcher defense is all that important, although I do think that it does have a little bit of importance. His blocking, but the big stat that I always like to look at is their blocking, and his blocking is kind of on par with a lot of other catchers that, you know, aren't as good with the other stuff, so people may not think they're as good defensively. But his fielding is great. His arm strength is very good. I just don't think it really matters that much, and he doesn't have great speed or anything like that. So because of that, I ended up giving him a fag of a 7.3. Okay, next up is a card that I really like, man. This 95 Dante Bichette. You know, my grade may not reflect how much I like this card, but I really do. I don't know, Dante Bichette just is like one of those cool-ass players from the 90s that everybody kind of remembers, but they don't really remember a whole lot about him if you're my age, and it's kind of cool that he's in the game now. And, man, he is just a monster hitter. And being a left fielder, hitting is more important as far as the FAG formula goes. It's more important than center field and right field. And this guy definitely steps up and is a great hitter. 92-88 versus righties, 91-95 versus lefties, 71 vision, so no problems there. I mean, he's just going to be a monster for you. And he also, I've been using this card a little bit, and he also has a fairly good swing that I like to use. It feels pretty comfortable, doesn't have a lot of top spin. I like his swing, and that's pretty rare for righty legends. It seems like righty legends tend to have very top spin heavy swings. So it was nice to get a guy in my hand who at least initially doesn't feel like that's the case. But the big problem with this card is his defense is not good at all. His speed is actually okay for a left fielder. Left field typically has slower guys in there, but his speed, 62 speed, that's not that bad. He's not going to be a hindrance on the base paths, but his defense is pretty bad. Like, you know, Matt Holliday-esque defense. It's not going to be very good for you. So because of that, whenever I plugged this guy into the FAG formula, his overall wasn't as high as I thought it would be. So I ended up giving him an 8.0, but I do think that if you can kind of hide this guy in left field, that you will get more utility out of him than an 8.0 FAG would indicate. Okay, moving on to a couple relief pitchers. The 95 overall Sergio Romo card. This card is very similar to the one that they come out with last year. And it's a card that I think it depends on what type of player you are. If you're a guy who really likes sinkers for your starters and relievers, if you're a guy who really likes to hit spots and be more of kind of a finesse pitcher, then this is the guy for you. He has one of the best sliders in the game. He has a decent sinker to go along with it. He doesn't throw really all that hard, but it does have a good amount of break on it. His pitch selection is very good with a decent changeup and a decent four-seam to go along with it. His per-nines aren't the best. They're kind of like Kelvin Herrera. They're very good, but they're not elite. Overall, an interesting card, but a guy who I'll definitely have to think for a while before I decide whether or not I'm going to try him. Because last year I bought him, and he was okay. He wasn't great. And I ended up, ditching him for a few other guys who did better for me. And my bullpen is so good at this point that I don't really see this guy finding a spot. But I may try him out. I don't know. I ended up giving him a FAG of an 8.1. Okay, next up is a very different pitcher, a very different closer, but a guy who kind of, as far as their value goes, I think they could end up falling kind of in the same type of category, and it's the 95 overall Cody Allen. He has great per-nines, fantastic per-nines, 97, 99, almost as good as you can get. Well, about as good as you can get without being a Aroldis Chapman or somebody like that. Well, I don't know. I keep saying Chapman, but Chapman did get downgraded, so I don't know. Maybe I'll have to find a different example for that. But he's also a guy who throws relatively hard for a reliever, and he's a guy. But the big downside to this card is that his pitch selection really isn't all that great. If this guy was four-seam slider changeup, I'm in. Put me in, because I would love this card. But the fact that he doesn't have a slider and he has a curveball instead, that leaves a lot more room for mistakes. If you have a slider, you can kind of get away with hanging that thing versus righties, and you're not going to hang it as often as a curveball anyway, and you're not going to get punished as much when you do hang it. But the fact that this guy's big breaking pitch is a curveball, that's going to make it a lot more difficult to use versus righties and lefties. But if you can kind of use him more as a fastball changeup type guy and just mix the curveball in, I do think that this guy could be fairly useful. I kind of see him and Sergio Romo having about the same amount of value, so I ended up giving him a FAG of an 8.1 as well. Okay, we're going to talk about, this player review is going to be a little bit different because we're going to talk about this 95 Roy Oswalt and this 99 Orel Hershiser kind of together because they're very different pitchers, but I end up kind of liking them about the same amount for different reasons. Okay, let's start with the Roy Oswalt. This Roy Oswalt and his per-9s are good, but they're not great. They pass that 155 threshold, but they don't go that far above it. So his per-9s are just kind of meh. But, you know, let's just leave that at that, and let's talk about this Hershiser's per-9s. He has great per-9s. What would that be? That would come out to a 170. He'd have a 170 per-9, and that is excellent. That is among some of the best in the game. I would give him a very, very high grade when it comes to his per-9s. Now let's talk about pitch selection. They're actually quite similar when it comes to their pitch selection. 4-seam, sinker, 12-6, slider, and changeup. And then the Orel Hershiser, he doesn't have a slider. He has a cutter that replaces it, but he's basically a sinker, 4-seam cutter, curveball, changeup type guys. So their pitch selection is very similar, but how they utilize it is very different. This is Jake Peavy. The Roy Oswalt definitely has better stuff. He throws harder. He has better break. And, so that might lead you to believe that I would pick this Roy Oswalt over this Orel Hershiser. But that's not necessarily the case because what I've noticed with most of all of Roy Oswalt's cards is that he has really good stuff, but his changeup always seems to be too hard. His breaking pitches tend to not be as effective as you would think they are. He's still, all three of his iterations are all great pitchers, guys who I would be happy to have in my rotation. But I do think that sometimes his velo and his break can sometimes lead you to believe things that aren't necessarily true about this card. But this Orel Hershiser is kind of the same way, but in an opposite direction. His stuff doesn't look that good. 70, 84. I mean, this guy maybe tops out at 92, 93 on a good day. His sinker, he throws at about 90, 91. And while the Oswalt throws his sinker at 94, 95, I've started to kind of realize that with sinkers, you almost don't want the velo, you want the break. Guys who throw really hard sinkers that don't break a lot, they tend to get a lot of jam shots into right field that end up falling as hits, while guys who throw their sinker not quite as hard but have a lot of break on it, those guys tend to get a lot of rollovers. They get a lot of swings and misses. It just seems like it has more effectiveness if they don't throw it as hard. And this guy does have more inherent break on his sinker than the Roy Oswalt does. And his changeup has really good speed differential as well. So probably a 12-mile-per-hour delta. Like, he probably throws his changeup from 79 to 80. So great stuff, even though he doesn't throw that hard. He has a good curveball and a good cutter, too, to keep hitters off balance. I wouldn't throw his 4-seam. So whenever I boil that all down, this was kind of tough to grade, but I ended up giving the Orel Hershiser an 8.7 out of 10, and I ended up giving the Roy Oswalt an 8.6 because I do think that they have similar value, but I do have to give the nod to the Orel Hershiser just because I think he's going to be able to keep hitters off balance more than the Roy Oswalt. So yeah, that was kind of a surprise to me. Okay, last but not least is the 99 overall Eddie Murray. You get this card by winning 40 games in events, and man, you could build an interesting lineup with this new release. There's so many switch hitters in the game now, and the way they do the lineup screen where you can't see the pitcher hand dismiss, switch hitters just have so much value. But if you toss that Beltran, this Eddie Murray, your creative player, a few more switch hitters in there, man, you could have an intriguing lineup. And this guy is great, man. He is great. 92, 97 versus righties. 84 vision, 77, 84 versus lefties. And, I always say that first basemen never really excite me unless they have something special about them. And the fact that this guy is a switch hitter is definitely special. And he also has really solid fielding. His speed isn't anything to write home about, but all of those things put together makes a card that I'm pretty damn excited about. And although, obviously he's not going to be as good as like Jeff Bagwell or anything like that, this is going to be a great card, man. So I ended up giving him a fag of an 8.7. But guys, that is going to do it for this player review. There were a lot of cards that I didn't go over. If you guys would like me to review those cards in a separate video, please let me know in the comments. I will be happy to do that. A lot of them really didn't seem like they were notable enough to really go over. So I just picked the 10 that I thought were the most useful in something like this. So yeah, just let me know in the comments what you guys would like. But with that being said, guys, I love all of you. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, I will see you guys later on. Peace!